Welcome back to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. My name is Derek Brown, and on this week's video, we're going to run through 8 players that ECR and you need to be higher on than consensus. Before we get to all these players, again, all the analysis I'm going to run through on this video can be found on FantasyPros.com in the primer. So head to FantasyPros.com right now as you're watching this video, read the primer, and enjoy the W's this week. Let's get to these 8 players. All right, first player up here on the list, and this is a player that's gotten a lot of buzz this week. Talked about him on the waiver wire show. Gonna mention him here again. Audric Estime, RB28 in Fantasy Pros ECR right now. What do we see from Estime last week? 45% of the snaps, 14 carries, 53 rushing yards. He got 2 of 3 red zone carries for Denver. And really all this lines up, if he continues to get all of the workload on the early downs, he should walk away with a really nice game in Week 11. Atlanta has been giving it up to running backs. 11th highest explosive run rate, 12th most rushing yards per game. Estime is a player you're probably playing as a flex play. Could walk away from Week 11 as a strong RB2. All right, staying in the RB2 area code, I want to discuss Nick Chubb. RB22 right now in ECR, and I don't disagree with that, but I think Nick Chubb deserves some shine this week, considering what have we seen out of him? He's gotten the early down role, his snaps have been limited in 2 of the 3 games he's played, but the matchup really dictates that if Cleveland can build a lead here, and Nick Chubb gets more volume, he could walk away with his best stat line of the entire season, and I know that's a low bar to clear, but he can be a strong RB2 this week. Looking at the Saints, it's just a franchise that's struggling right now. Defense, offense, bye-bye Dennis Allen, like all the things. The Saints have allowed the 6th most rushing yards per game and the 13th highest missed tackle rate. So for a player like Chubb that's still trying to kind of find his feet right now in the NFL season, could walk away with his best game of the 2024 season in Week 11. Okay, that's enough running back talk. Let's move over to the wide receivers now. Jameson Williams is a player that I highlighted and I want to discuss in this video because our wide receiver 32 in ECR right now. And really, we know Jacksonville cannot guard wide receivers. It's been a pass defense we've been targeting in fantasy every single week, and I don't think we should stop now. So Jameson Williams, looking at Jacksonville's coverage structure since week 4, they have the second highest 2-high rate in the NFL. 64% of their defensive snaps. Why does this matter? Because against 2-high, Jameson Williams is second on the team in target per route run rate with 25%, has 2.07 yards per route run, and has a 31.6% first read share. So what are we seeing by the Detroit Lions offense? Jared Goff coming off, straight up a bad game. This is a wonderful opportunity. Yes, Detroit can run the ball versus Jacksonville. I'm not saying they won't. This is a wonderful opportunity for a get-right game for both Jameson Williams and Jared Goff moving forward. So you want a statement game? You want to build momentum type of game? That's what this could be for Detroit's passing attack in Week 11. All right, staying with the wide receivers, Quentin Johnston is a player I think we need to discuss this week. Wide receiver 38 in consensus on Fantasy Pros right now. And the reason I want to highlight him is Cincinnati's run defense has gotten better. This is not the, they're going to run the ball all over them type of matchup that I think a lot of people look at this as well as Cincinnati's going to push this offense. They're going to have to throw the ball. So, pass funnel opportunity. Another offense on the other side is going to force them to throw the ball and put up points. Should lead to a big game for QJ. And what have we seen out of Cincinnati? Since Week 8, they have the 7th highest 2-high rate in the NFL, 53% of their defensive snaps. Why does this matter? Because Quentin Johnston has 2.4 yards per route run against 2-high and a 19% first read share, and Cincinnati's outside corners have arguably been terrible since Week 5. They're allowing the 3rd highest fantasy points per game and the 3rd highest receiving yards per game to outside wide receivers. So a lot of people are going to look at Ladd McConkey in this matchup. I got 2 Chargers. Yes, I'm foreshadowing a little bit. 2 Chargers you need to look at getting into your lineups this week, and QJ is definitely one of them. All right, before we break into the top 4 players on this week's list, if you're juggling multiple fantasy football teams and feeling a bit overwhelmed right now, let Fantasy Pros help you simplify things. With the multi-league assistant, you could see all the latest news, notes, and rankings for every single player across all of your teams in this one spot. making your path to victory clearer and easier. Dive in and let us help you dominate all of your leagues with the multi-league assistant right now at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or in the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Download it today. All right, let's get to the top 4 of this list. And the first guy I got to talk about here, again, staying with wide receivers, is Ricky Pearsall. George Kittle, this is part of this. George Kittle is banged up right now, opened the week he didn't practice, dealing with a hamstring issue. I don't think it's a lock to play. I know the 49ers beat writers and they're optimistic, but we don't know. So, again, before we even talk about the matchup itself, Ricky Pearsall could get a bump in targets if George Kittle is out, because Saubert, nobody else in that tight end room is going to demand targets the way that George Kittle does. So we got to get that out of the way. But getting to the matchup, Seattle since week 2 has the 10th highest rate of single high in the NFL. Why does this matter? Again, I know I keep coming back to all the coverage data, but if you've read the primer, this leads you to fantasy points, people, and you should care about this. Since week 7, Ricky Pearsall against single high has almost 2.0 yards per route run. Seattle has been bad against wide receivers, allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game and the 3rd most receiving yards per game to perimeter wide receivers. Pearsall could walk away with a wonderful game in your flex spot this week, or your wide receiver 3 spot. Get him into your lineups. All right, I know you could say this is a little bit more of a thin play, but hear me out, people, especially if you're in deep leagues or if you're in the betting streets. You need to look at Kayshon Boutte this week. Wide receiver 53 in ECR. The reason I'm telling you to consider Kayshon Boutte, and I know you're going to say, oh, it's the Patriots. Why not Pop Douglas? Well, Pop Douglas saw his route share drop last week. So we've seen volatility out of this passing attack. But the one consistent role we have seen in this passing attack is Kayshon Boutte's outside and deep passing role. And this matters this week because the Rams have allowed the 5th most deep passing yards and the 4th highest pass rating to deep passes. Now, the fly in the ointment here is, yes, the Rams have been very good at getting pressure, but Drake Maye can use his legs. We know the rushing utility is there. He can also scramble and buy himself some time in the pocket. So if he can do that this week and feed deep targets to Kayshon Boutte, he could walk away with a really, really solid game as a wide receiver 3 this week against a Rams secondary that has struggled against outside wide receivers. Since week 6, they've allowed the 6th most receiving yards per game and the 7th most fantasy points per game to the position. Consider Kayshon Boutte, although you might think that I'm crazy, consider him for a flex spot in your lineup this week. All right, I kind of teased the Chargers earlier and talked about I was going to bring up another player. Okay, let's get to that player. No further ado. Will Dissly this week, tight end 17, and this all comes down to the coverage shell matchup. And again, Will Dissly's been getting volume, people, since week 6. 21% target share, 1.7 yards per route run in those 5 games I just mentioned. 5 red zone targets. So again, what do we talk about with tight ends? The lifeblood of tight ends is not only the volume, it's touchdowns. Dissly could score this week, and Cincinnati has moved to more too high coverage in the last few weeks. Against too high, Will Dissly is eating volume. 31% target per route run rate, 24% first read share, and almost 2.4 yards per route run. Yeah, Will Dissly's probably going to end up as a tight end 1 this week. All right, talked about him earlier in this video. Going to mention him again. The number 1 player I want people to consider if they need upside at the quarterback position this week, and that is Drake Maye. He has finished as a QB1 in half of his starts this year. Talked about the Rams' exploitable pass defense. Going to mention it again. They've allowed the 8th most passing yards per game and the 2nd highest yards per attempt. Talked about deep shots to Kayshon Boutte earlier. If we get that, we're getting ceiling upside from Drake Maye. The matchup dictates this could be a sneaky shootout game this week. If that happens, Drake Maye is probably a QB1 in week 11. All right, everyone, those are the 8 players that you need to consider to be higher on than consensus on FantasyPros.com. Again, head over to FantasyPros.com, read the primer, and get these 8 players into your lineups and enjoy all of the wins in week 11. I'll see you in week 12.